Salutations, everybody. It is Matty here today, and it is finally here, the day we have all been waiting for, Mass Effect Legendary Edition. Now, before we begin, e-hugs to everybody and a big thank you. We've talked about RPGs for years. We've always talked about Mass Effect on the channel, but when it comes to Mass Effect Legendary Edition, our journey really began in February of 2020, speculating on how Mass Effect could return in 2020. Now, we were off by a couple of months, but here we are in 2021 with Mass Effect Legendary Edition in hand. So to those of you who have supported the years of news updates, the sadness of the internal delays that we covered here on the channel, now here we are with the game. Thank you so much for supporting all of my content. We will continue to do more Mass Effect content for both Legendary Edition and Mass Effect 4, but please do stick around. We have lots of other RPGs to talk about, news to cover, so I hope you stick. And also, when it comes to Mass Effect stuff, we will be starting our Insanity stream today. It'll be archived on my channel for those of you to check out if you do end up missing it. But thank you all so much. This has been a blast of a journey, and let's keep it going. So, now on to Mass Effect Legendary Edition as a game. Now, I've had this game since Tuesday. This is not my full review. This is impressions. No one got the game before Tuesday, so anyone who's calling it a review didn't really beat any of the games because we just didn't have enough time to do any of that. So what I did with my time was played about 15 hours of this game. I spent a lot of my time with Mass Effect 1 because that received the most changes in Legendary Edition, but I also dabbled within Mass Effect 2 and 3. Then I went into Xbox Game Pass and I downloaded Mass Effect 1, 2, and 3 in their original state to cross-reference and check out some of the things that have changed and, of course, lay my hands on it, feel those differences. And then, to my surprise, I also had a PC code, so I was able to check out the PC port a little bit and give my report on that. Once again, not my final review, okay? We're going to be doing that later on when I complete all the games. I've seen more of the versions. We see some of the shaking out of the communities, but at the end of the day, this is just my impressions, and feel free to share it around because I had access to a lot of versions of the game, and I have a pretty thorough take as a big fan of the franchise. We're going to mainly focus on Mass Effect 1. Let's start off with that because, like I said, this received the most changes. What works that's new? What feels old? Does anything feel bad? Let's talk. Gameplay is really going to be the focus here. We'll talk about the story in just a little bit. Now, the number one thing that I was hoping for with Mass Effect 1 was that the camera would be pulled out a lot. We heard about it, but with Mass Effect Legendary Edition, we never really saw this game fully in action. It's something that I complained about a lot. The good news is it runs fine, 4K, 60 FPS. I played it on Series X so it could run up to 120 FPS. However, my TV canceled the update for variable refresh rate, so I couldn't get 120 FPS. Go figure. Glad I spent $900 on that. But anyway, with Mass Effect, it can go up to that. So it looks great. It ran great so far on Series X, and my experience with the PC port was strong. When it comes to gameplay, though, that camera gets pulled out a little bit, and when I went back to the original, that's when you really feel the differences because Mass Effect 1 still feels old even in the Legendary Edition. Now, it's not bad, but it does still feel old because when you play Mass Effect 2 and 3, even on their Xbox 360 and PS3 versions, you can press A to hop into cover, you can vault over it. Meanwhile, Mass Effect 1 has soft cover, so you have to be standing next to cover with your gun out, and then Shepard will automatically press into it. Sometimes you'll accidentally stick to cover, sometimes you want to get into cover and you can't get into cover. It can be a little bit annoying, but the good news is that when you get into cover, it's not so super zoomed in like the original, where you literally could not even see Commander Shepard. Now you can see him or her, and you can pop out of cover, you can shoot. It's a lot more accurate. The other major change with gunplay is that it's not so skill driven. So out of the three games, Mass Effect 1 is the strongest role-playing game. It does a lot of stat checking, dice rolling to make sure that everything is accounted for. So for all intents and purposes, it's a real true role-playing game. They dialed back a little bit of that, so Mass Effect 1 played more like a third-person shooter, so it was more of that RPG action hybrid that I think BioWare was shooting from the get-go. On console, there's a little bit of soft aim assist, so it's snapping to your targets, whereas in the original, none of that had occurred. Same thing with PC. There is no aim assist over there, as I'm sure you'd expect when using keyboard and mouse. And overall, that felt much better to play because that was something I noticed going into the original and playing that again on Eden Prime and thinking, wow, this does not feel that great. That means that the gameplay changes so far on the ground, shooting, running around, feel pretty good, all things accounted for. But do know it's not going to feel like Mass Effect 2. It's not going to feel like Mass Effect 3. It still feels a little bit dated. But definitely when it comes to the definitive way to play gameplay wise, yeah, it goes to this version of Mass Effect 1. Now, I know that's probably the most important question a lot of you want answered, so we're going to roll it back a little bit now and get into the character creator. So this was something that had a couple of extra changes in here, like the new female Shepard, who is the default one for Mass Effect 3, is now relevant throughout the entire trilogy. She's now the new default. On top of that, the character creator boasted some new hairstyles that they had inspired from mods, so those are in the game now. Nothing crazy is going to blow your mind, and it's actually the only role-playing game where I just use the default models. Like, I can't imagine Shepard, both female and male, looking like any other way. I can't. Still, there is a new character creator. There are more options, and I know a lot of you out there like to spend a lot of time with things like that, so just know you have plenty more options to work with. Getting back into the gameplay, something that I did appreciate a lot was the new level scaling called Legendary Mode. So heading into the options before the game even begins, there's a Legendary Mode that they talked about prior to launch, which scales everything up so you can hit level cap before the game ends. Now, in the original Mass Effect 1, you would have to replay the game to hit level cap. That's no longer the thing. What's interesting now is you feel like you are power leveling through this game, and it feels surprisingly good and not really unbalanced. Like, you're just flying up the level chart, though. Every quest, it just feels like you're leveling up, or you forget to level up and suddenly you got like 8 points to spend. It feels pretty good in that way. I actually enjoy that a lot. But if you don't want that, there's the classic mode, which you can switch back to, and you can play Mass Effect 1 in its traditional sense when it comes to how the XP is handed out. And I thought that was good because they've done it for every section of the game. We'll talk about the Mako as well. The Mako received a lot of changes, and you can go back to the original controls for that. The only thing you can't go back to the original mode for is the actual shooting. So if you want it to be that dice rolling RPG but just look a lot better, you can't have that, but you can still have the old Mako controls. You can have the old XP payout. I thought this was a really weird omission because they seem to have held on to everything but that. There's also frame rate and quality mode, HDR support. Let's talk a little bit about the visuals. This is something that I think is going to be hit or miss for some people. Overall, the game looks clean. It looks just incredibly sharp. Mass Effect 1 has never looked better, but there are moments that we talked about pre-launch and now some things that I've experienced that I thought, this looks a little off. It looks a little different. And I had to go and investigate, go into my editing software, take screenshots, go back and forth, and I was able to pick it apart, mostly with Mass Effect 3. Now, of course, there is the moment on Eden Prime where a lot of the red sky has been dimmed down, and you can really see that when you go back to the original. I think this is just a bad choice of design. Overall, I think it takes away something from the atmosphere, but it is more lore friendly. What I'm realizing is this is the case in more areas than just Eden Prime. When we head over to Mass Effect 3 for our next example, you're either going to see what I mean or you're going to think I'm absolutely insane. So, of course, at the beginning of Mass Effect 3, Earth is attacked, and it's a very strong yet sad moment that sets off the events for the rest of the game. Obviously, it looks great in the remaster, as you can see here, but I couldn't shake this feeling when I went back to the Xbox 360 version once again that this looked better from an atmospherical standpoint, just like Eden Prime. However, this one was more difficult to put my finger on because it wasn't a simple changing of colors and it was less noticeable. So it took me looking at these two screenshots I captured to narrow down what I believe is happening here. Now, when you look at the Xbox 360 version, it's clearly having more contrast. The textures of the buildings weren't shiny and clean, and overall, that darkness makes the moment feel grim. But when you look at the remaster, it's clearly better on a visual level. The textures are slightly cleaned up on the buildings. It doesn't have that rugged look, kind of like the 360. Plus, the lighting is stronger, making the scene slightly brighter and almost alleviating all of the tension from this big moment at the beginning of the game. Another aspect of the game's visual design that can be attested to some of the changes we're seeing here is film grain, or really the lack thereof in the remaster. It's still there, but when I went back to each of the originals, mostly with Mass Effect 1, it was very much apparent it was there, almost looking like someone threw sand on my screen. And with each entry, BioWare lessened up more and more, but it was still very much apparent it was there. Whereas with the Mass Effect remasters, it's slightly there,
but I think that could be also a reason why I felt like the moments that I was watching on the 360 version in motion were a little bit darker than what I was seeing with the remaster. So just another little visual tidbit there to pull out of all of this. Let's not forget about Mass Effect 2, however, which actually gets a sneaky good upgrade that I don't think anyone is going to talk about nearly enough. Heading back to this one on my Series X through backwards compatibility, oh my word, this game has a lot of aliasing. It makes Persona 5 Strikers look like it's got some sharp character models, man. I mean, I gotta say, I'm pretty impressed with this. It's been cleaned up a lot more. I don't want to oversell it to you all because it's something I only noticed going back, but it is a substantial upgrade, whereas Mass Effect 3 did not clearly struggle graphically as much going back to that one, but this one, wow. Quite the difference in my opinion. Some people who are nerds like me will notice these very slight differences, but just a reminder, it took me going into editing software and really messing around to nail down what felt off, but I did have that initial feeling. And while that's something that's intangible, I still wanted to offer that to all of you out there because I know some of you were a bit concerned about the visual changes and how they may feel. And it does permeate throughout multiple entries, not just Mass Effect 1 in one specific area. Back to Mass Effect 1, let's focus on some major changes. One addition is photo mode. So you can hop into photo mode. You can take all the beautiful pictures that you want. I know this is a big deal for a lot of people. I don't really care about photo mode, not because it's bad or anything, just I'd rather walk around and play the game than take pictures of it. That's just me. I'll share my occasional moment when the game looks beautiful, but I don't like to go into photo mode, put on the filters and change everything up and just showcase it to the world. That's just not me. But for those of you who care, that is there. Also, the Mako. So this thing controlled pretty poorly in the original. It was slow. There was an XP penalty, so when you used it, it was like, why am I even bothering? Because I'm losing out and I can't even hit the level cap once now. So they fixed the XP penalty. That's gone. And they added thrusters so you can, say, get up a mountain a little bit quicker. You can explore the area a little bit faster. And I like this. This is actually a really good change. It controls better, feels better. This is, I think, objectively better. I can't imagine why you'd want to go back to the old Mako controls. You can, but there is absolutely no need to. It feels great. The elevator changes are also there, so some conversations have been altered to accommodate the shorter elevator rides. Some are actually longer, but you can hit the A button or the X button and you can just go ahead and skip it and leave the elevator. And that's also a testament to the lightning fast load times. This is on next gen consoles as well. Playing it on the Series X, there was just boom, snappy load times. Much, much quicker than the originals. And this is with all the new bells and whistles. It runs really fast, and I love that. I think that's to be expected. I think a lot of people were like, no big deal. Who cares, Matty? But just for those of you who weren't expecting that, know that you're going to be in the action really fast. They never keep you waiting. Another under the radar change that I think a lot of people are going to miss is the audio. So some of the weapons in the original Mass Effect sound not that great. Listen to this pistol in Mass Effect 1. Now, go ahead and listen to the pistol in Mass Effect Legendary Edition. To me, just the weapons have overall more punch. They sound better, and I like that a lot. For me, I'm very audio driven. You don't need to be an audio guru and be able to identify things through terminology and dissect it all and what's happening with reverb and everything. It's just like sounding better is that simple. It's cleaner. It's been sharpened up, and I appreciate that, especially coming off of Baldur's Gate Dark Alliance, this re-release that kept the old PS2 audio. It sounds terrible, so I'm glad they went to the effort of scrubbing up the audio and making things a much more enjoyable thing to listen to, especially with a game with a ton of dialogue. That is a really, really good thing to have. Last thing with Mass Effect 1 that I want to throw out there is some of the rebalancing of areas that they talked about. I'm wondering how people are going to feel about this, if it'll provide a Ninja Gaiden Sigma sort of effect where I liked Sigma, and then I learned that with the Sigma difficulties, they have been scaled pretty poorly, where a lot of people hate Ninja Gaiden Sigma. And so I noticed with some of the areas in Mass Effect 1, the way the AI reacted, in comparison to what I played in Mass Effect 1 on the 360, things were more aggressive on the 360, where on the Legendary Edition, they were
less so. Even though the enemy types were the same, they were spread out in different areas, especially on Eden Prime. When you started to defuse the bombs, I noticed there was a little bit of a difference there. So that was something that I wanted to point out to everybody, because this could lead to a different feeling where you go, huh, that was easier than last time, and that was the goal of design. But I'm going to be curious to see how some fans also feel about that. Once again, just a thing I wanted to put on your radar. All is not perfect, however, because there is bugs, and a decent amount of them. All right, so like in my first 3 hours, the game crashed twice. This was after the review patch came in. Not only were there crashes, there was also a bug on Novaria where I got like stuck in the wall and I couldn't do anything. I was just completely stuck there. I couldn't move around. I couldn't take out my weapons, and I had to like mess with the systems, hit a bunch of different controls, and eventually I just popped out of the wall. There's also, of course, audio bugs. Take a listen to this. A little bit frustrating on the technical part of things. Nothing horrific, nothing Halo Master Chief Collection level bad in the terms of remasters that are broken. So don't worry about all of that, but still a little bit disappointing on that front. The facial animations, especially in Mass Effect 1, could have used a little bit of tuning up. Very bug-eye, people just looking around like they've not slept for 30 hours and they're just cranked up on drugs. Like they're just sitting there like, okay. And all that happens is their mouth moves. So it looks a little funny, and you can really see the improvements with Mass Effect 2 and 3. And it's weird just because they all look about as good, but the facial animations are the noticeable changes. So this is something that is a little frustrating in hindsight, because it just feels better and it looks better, but the facial animation technology just looks old, and I think they could have done a little bit of a better job with that. Also, I was kind of surprised this was never a quality of life enhancement, but the Mass Effect 1, you can't bring up your journal when you're in the galaxy map, and so I had to pop out of the galaxy map and then like find my quest and then go back in, and I found that a little tedious. Not that it's like a game changer or anything, but I'm surprised out of all the simple quality of life enhancements that have been put into this game, this was not one of them. So for those who are curious on the story sense, what's happening with Mass Effect 1, Shepard heads to Eden Prime, where things have really started to go awry. Upon the completion of his mission, he was supposed to earn his Spectre status, but corruption within is preventing that from happening. So you have this council here that ends up serving as the spark plug for future events in the game, talking about, is humanity expanding too fast because they've just arrived and they want power now? And then, of course, the theological chain of the Geth, and then the Reapers and what's happening there. And it's just highlighting how much of a well-written, well-built universe Mass Effect is. Like, it has been about 7-8 years since I've gone back to Mass Effect 1. I played it on the PS3 of all places. And going back to it now, I mean, what a fantastic start. And now that it plays better, people are going to have a very much newfound appreciation for Mass Effect 1. That's a no-doubter. As for Mass Effect 2 and 3, we don't need to get into story stuff. I think it's unnecessary, and for new fans, it just drives spoilers up the wall. So these games overall feel about the same. They just look better. It didn't receive that many changes. When it comes to Mass Effect 2, there are definitely way more ammo pickups. That much was apparent right off the bat. I saw that immediately. They were all over the place. So that is something that has been tweaked. They also talked about that prior to launch, and you could feel that when going back to the original. As for Mass Effect 3, I talked already about the graphical changes. That was probably the biggest takeaway for that. When it comes to galactic readiness, this is something that we can't comment on because, like I said, no one has played this game long enough to even test that out, which is why if anyone's calling it a review, they're probably lying to you, because there's no way that you can actually review the game. Like, no one completed it. We could not see all the mechanics. So this is just my impressions overall of Mass Effect Legendary Edition. I've really been enjoying my time with it. Like I said, I'm going to be streaming it more. Now, for those of you who are on the fence, should I buy it? Shouldn't I buy it? I do think it's safe to look into purchasing. Check out other people's opinions, as I always recommend in my preview or review coverage, just to see what other people are having an experience with. This is my experience on Xbox and PC. Things were clean on the port side of things, although the loading times were slower and it was a little bit weird with the launcher, but nothing that was distracting or broken. Key binding was fine. So I had an overall great time with it. It's exactly what I wanted. Just expect a little bit of a dated feeling for Mass Effect 1 despite all the cleaning up they did. It's a testament that it still feels pretty good to play, how well of a game they made and how much they did clean up, but it's not
like Mass Effect 2, where you're playing like this action RPG. A little bit different there. But overall, those are my thoughts, and I'd love to hear some of yours in the comments down below. I hope to see you all in future videos, whether they be more reviews, news, discussions, streams, what have you. Looking forward to interacting with you and seeing more of your thoughts. Other than that, follow me on Twitter, follow me on Instagram. Those links are in the description down below. And a big thank you to all the patrons. We're very close to hitting that Mass Effect Legendary Edition Supercut. So we hit that goal, we can get that rocking and rolling here on the channel. All right, I'll talk with all of you very soon. Stay sexy, stay active. I love you all. Peace.